I'm about to tell you which of these 5 cabins you should never buy. But first, you need to see why people keep making the same mistake. Everyone's hunting for affordable Canadian real estate right now. Northern Ontario cabins are everywhere. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Look at this waterfront property for 70 grand. But here's what nobody's saying. Half these listings are traps, and the other half require sacrifices most people won't admit they can't handle. I spent 6 weeks deep in Northern Ontario real estate, analyzed every listing under $130,000, cross-referenced climate data from Environment Canada, pulled property tax records, studied municipal zoning laws, even called realtors pretending to be a cash buyer just to get the real story. And what I found is going to save some of you from a very expensive mistake. 5 cabins, 5 completely different realities. One of these is a legitimate opportunity. 2 are livable if you actually know what you're signing up for. 1 looks perfect in photos but has a restriction that'll drain your savings for decades. And 1, well, it doesn't have a bathroom, not needs renovation, doesn't have one. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which is which. Let's get into it. Before we start, I need to set expectations. These aren't suburban houses with granite countertops and walk-in closets. These are properties where your closest neighbor might be 3 kilometers away, where winter lasts 7 months, and where municipal services means the road gets plowed twice a week if you're lucky. But that's also what makes them interesting, because if you can handle the reality, not the Instagram version, the actual day-to-day reality, some of these represent incredible value, waterfront property, wilderness access, and genuine off-grid potential for less than a used truck costs in Toronto. The key is knowing what you're actually buying. I'll walk through all 5 properties from cheapest to most expensive for each one, what the listing says, what the data says, and what the listing conveniently doesn't mention. Then at the end, I'll rank them by actual value, and that ranking is going to surprise you. Let's start with the one that made me question everything. $79,900, Wawa, Ontario. 2 bedrooms, 0 bathrooms, 640 square feet. Waterfront, on the Mishipikoten River. Yes, I said 0 bathrooms. This is a recreational cabin on leased land near Wawa. Population roughly 3,000 as of 2025. The Mishipikoten River flows into Lake Superior, so we're talking legitimate wilderness waterfront. The listing mentions fishing, hunting, swimming, classic Northern Ontario recreation. The property sits in a wildlife management area, which is both a selling point if you're into that, and a warning if you're not prepared to share space with moose, bears, and everything else that lives out here. The cabin itself is rustic, wood-paneled walls, a wood stove for heat, older construction but structurally intact from what the photos show. There's a small bunkie, basically a storage shed, and what looks like a tool shed. The lot is just under an acre, heavily treed, private. According to my research, Wawa is about 25 minutes north via Anjigami Road, which the listing confirms is plowed year-round. That's actually important. Some of these remote properties are seasonal access only. Here's where it gets interesting. The listing says lake or river water intake. That's realtor code for you're drawing water directly from the river. No municipal water. You're either filtering river water, hauling it from town, or installing a well yourself, and drilling a well in Northern Ontario runs $15,000 to $25,000 depending on depth. The 0 bathrooms thing, that's not a typo. This property genuinely has no toilet, no shower, no plumbing. You're building an outhouse or using the great outdoors, and before you think, I'll just add a bathroom, consider this. You'd need to install a septic system, which starts at $10,000 minimum, plus the actual bathroom construction. You're looking at $20,000 to $30,000 in improvements just to get basic sanitation. Heating is wood stove only, no furnace, no backup. Wawa's average January temperature sits around minus 20 Celsius, with cold snaps hitting minus 35 regularly, according to Environment Canada data. You're splitting firewood in that climate every single day, for 7 months. And it's off-grid. The listing doesn't mention hydro, which means there isn't any. You're running a generator or installing solar panels. A basic solar setup for a 600 square foot cabin, enough for lights, a fridge, maybe a laptop, starts around $8,000 to $12,000. So you buy this for 80 grand. Sounds cheap, but add a well at $20,000, a septic system and bathroom at $25,000, solar power at $10,000. You're at $135,000 all in. That's before furniture, before winterizing, before fixing anything that breaks. If you're genuinely prepared to live off-grid, if you've got construction skills or money for contractors, and if you actually want wilderness isolation, this could be incredible. 80 grand for Waterfront is unheard of anywhere else in Canada. But if you're imagining weekend getaways where you show up, relax, and leave, this isn't that. This is a project that'll consume your weekends, your budget, and your patience. I'll tell you at the end where this ranks. For now, just remember, cheapest doesn't mean best. That's property one. Now let's go somewhere that actually has a bathroom. $109,900. Timmins area, specifically Mount Joy Rural. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, roughly 700 to 1,100 square feet. Chalet-style cabin. This property has a completely different vibe from Wawa. Wood-paneled walls, vaulted ceilings, a sleeping loft, and a wood stove with a stone feature that actually looks good. The interior's been updated within the last decade based on the photos. Vinyl plank flooring, a functional kitchen with propane appliances, and a full bathroom that exists and works. The location is about 20 minutes from Timmins proper via Highway 101 and Kamiskoshu Road. The listing mentions it's near a ski area, which makes sense. Timmins has a couple of small ski hills, and this cabin is clearly targeting the winter sports crowd. Timmins itself is important context. It's the largest city in northern Ontario by land area, population around 42,000. It's a former gold mining town. The mines are still operating, though not at historical levels. The economy is stable enough that services exist. Hospitals, grocery stores, schools, all the infrastructure you'd expect from a small city. Here's what you need to understand about Timmins. It's cold, genuinely, seriously cold. According to Environment Canada, January averages hover around -18 Celsius, but cold snaps regularly push below -30. The heating season runs from October through April, 7 months. This cabin has baseboard electric heating plus the wood stove. That's a problem. Electric baseboard heat in northern Ontario winters is expensive, $300 to $400 a month if you're heating the whole cabin. Most people who actually live in these properties rely almost entirely on the wood stove and use electric as emergency backup. But that means you're feeding the stove constantly. The listing says it's a seasonal property, which raises questions. Does that mean seasonal access or seasonal zoning that restricts year-round living? The road is maintained, but you'd want to confirm winter accessibility before assuming you can use this December through March. This is a 1-bedroom cabin with a loft. The loft adds sleeping space, but it's not a second bedroom. It's an open area above the main floor. If you're thinking this works for a family, it's tight. This is a couple's cabin or a solo retreat. But here's the thing. It's turnkey. You could buy this, show up with your suitcase, and start using it immediately. Compared to Wawa, that's a massive advantage. At $110,000, this is 30 grand more than Wawa, but you're getting a functioning cabin with plumbing, power, and heat. The question is whether you're willing to accept a smaller space and higher heating costs in exchange for not having to build infrastructure from scratch. Remember this one, it's going to matter when we do the final ranking. Now, same price range but with actual waterfront. Let's see what 85 years of history looks like. $125,000, Schreiber, Ontario. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 760 square feet. Built in 1940. Waterfront on Walker's Lake. This is where things get tempting. Legitimate lakefront property. Not river access, not water views. Actual waterfront on a named lake. Walker's Lake is a small, quiet lake in the Schreiber area, and according to local fishing reports, it's got decent base populations with walleye and pike in nearby connected lakes. The property is just over half an acre, heavily treed, with a deck facing the water. The photos show a rustic cabin with wood paneling, older fixtures, and what looks like original character intact. For people who want vintage cottage vibes, this has it. Schreiber itself is tiny, population around 900, but it sits directly on the Trans-Canada Highway and the north shore of Lake Superior. You're about 200 kilometers from Thunder Bay, which means access to a real city if needed. Here's the problem. This cabin was built in 1940. That's 85 years old. I'm not saying old buildings can't be good. I'm saying you need to know what you're dealing with. Old wiring, old plumbing, potentially old insulation or no insulation at all, which was common in seasonal cabins from that era. The photos show worn flooring, dated kitchen cabinets, and what might be moisture damage near the windows. Though it's hard to confirm without seeing it in person, the listing says water is lake or river water intake, which means you're drawing directly from Walker's Lake. That's fine for seasonal use, but if you want year-round living, you'll need a proper filtration system. A UV filtration setup plus sediment filters runs around $2,000 to $4,000 installed. Heating is wood stove only. No furnace. In a climate where winter temperatures hit -25 regularly, heating an 85-year-old cabin with a single wood stove is a full-time job. Property taxes are listed at $5,188 annually. That's steep for a cabin this size, but waterfront properties always carry a premium. Let's say you buy this for $125,000. You'll immediately need to address electrical updates, $5,000 to $10,000 if it's not up to code. Plumbing repairs, $2,000 to $5,000 depending on condition. Insulation upgrades, $5,000 to $8,000 for walls and attic. Water filtration, $3,000. General cosmetic updates, another $10,000 minimum. You're looking at $30,000 to $40,000 in immediate renovations just to make this comfortable. That puts your all-in cost around $165,000. If you're a DIY person who can do electrical, plumbing, and carpentry yourself, this becomes way more viable. You could buy this, spend summers renovating, and end up with a beautiful lakefront cabin for significantly less than buying one that's already updated. But if you're paying contractors for everything, the math doesn't work. You're better off buying something that doesn't need the investment. Hold that thought. 2 more properties to go, and one of them is about to change how you think about all of this. Okay, let's pause for a second. 3 cabins in, and here's the pattern. Every cheap listing is basically asking you a question. How much isolation can you handle? Can you split firewood every day for 7 months? Will you actually do the renovation work, or will this sit half-finished for 5 years? The properties aren't the problem. Your honesty with yourself is. The next 2 cabins are where most people get fooled. Same price tag, completely different realities. One of them looks absolutely perfect in photos. Modern, clean, Instagram ready. And it's the worst value on this entire list. Let me show you why. $125,000, same price as Schreiber. Completely different property. Timmins area, specifically TCTDAR, outside. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 600 square feet. Built within the last 5 years. This cabin is new, brand new. Bright blue exterior with white trim, modern interior with updated everything, laminate flooring, white kitchen cabinets, stainless appliances, full bathroom with tiled shower. The deck is new. There's a covered patio area. And the whole place looks like it belongs on an Instagram feed. Heating is propane forced air, which is way more efficient than electric baseboard. The cabin's well-insulated double-paned windows, proper construction. You could use this in winter without bankrupting yourself on heating costs. The location is on a seasonal campground off Highway 144 north of Timmins. The listing specifically mentions this, and here's where things get complicated. Seasonal campground. Those 2 words change everything. The listing says the title is freehold. That sounds reassuring, but here's the problem. Freehold means nothing if a third party controls who you can sell to. The campground owner must approve every buyer. You hold the title on paper, but someone else holds the power in practice. In real terms, this property behaves more like a leasehold than true ownership. And most buyers won't realize that until it's too late. On top of that, this isn't freehold in the traditional sense because the land sits inside a privately operated campground. That means annual site fees. The listing doesn't specify the amount, but seasonal campground fees in Ontario typically run $1,000 to $3,000 per year. That's on top of your purchase price. Forever, you'll be paying those fees in 10 years, 20 years, as long as you own this cabin. It also means rules and restrictions. Campgrounds have rules. Quiet hours, guest policies, pet restrictions. Some don't allow permanent residency, and it means seasonal use only. Most seasonal campgrounds operate May through October. Water and power get shut off in winter. Can you use this year-round? Probably not. I called 3 seasonal campgrounds in the Timmins area to confirm this. 2 said explicitly, No winter access, water lines get winterized in October, and even if you wanted to use the cabin, you'd be on your own for utilities. One said they allow year-round access but charge extra fees, and you're responsible for your own power and water in winter. $125,000 purchase price, $2,000 per year in site fees. Over 20 years, a typical cabin ownership timeline, that's an additional $40,000. You're actually paying $165,000 for this cabin spread out over time. Compare that to Schreiber at the same list price where freehold actually means freehold. No site fees, no campground owner approval, no rules about your guests. The numbers tell a very different story than the photos do. You're buying a turnkey, modern cabin that you can use for 6 months a year, with ongoing fees you can never escape, and a title that says freehold but functions like anything but. If that's what you want, a summer retreat, weekend getaways, a base camp for fishing trips, this works. It's move-in ready, it's cute, and it's low maintenance. But you're not getting freedom. You're getting convenience with permanent strings attached and a legal structure designed to look better than it is. Remember this property. We're coming back to it. $129,999. Hillsport, Ontario, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 962 square feet. This is the biggest property we've looked at, 3 bedrooms. That's family-sized. The interior photos show an open living and dining area, a functional kitchen, and what looks like relatively recent updates. There's a wood stove for primary heat and propane forced air as backup. Exactly the combo you want in Northern Ontario. The lot is under half an acre but treed and private. There's a detached garage, a deck, and a woodshed for storage. The listing mentions recreational zoning, which typically means seasonal use, but Hillsport is accessible year-round via maintained roads. Hillsport itself barely exists. It's not even a town. It's a locality, but it's 5 minutes from White Otter Lake, which is known for excellent fishing and hunting. The listing specifically calls this out: world-class fishing and hunting right at your doorstep, so you're remote but not completely cut off. Here's what concerns me. The listing says recreational zoning, and annual property taxes are listed as $0. That combination usually means unorganized township land. Unorganized townships in Ontario don't have municipal governments, no bylaw enforcement, no municipal services, and sometimes ambiguous rules about permanent residency. Some allow year-round living, others technically don't, though enforcement is rare. I'd want written confirmation from the township before buying this if the plan is to live here full-time. But for recreational use, weekends, vacations, seasonal living, this is perfectly fine. At $130,000, this is the most expensive property on the list. But you're also getting the most space, the most functionality and proximity to genuinely excellent outdoor recreation for a family that wants a cabin they can actually use. Not a project, not a summer-only retreat with eternal fees, but a real functional space with real ownership. This delivers. The question is whether that extra $50,000 over the cheapest option is worth it. Let's find out. All right, 5 cabins. Time to rank them by actual value. Number 5, Timmins TCTDAR Campground, $125,000. Remember at the beginning when I said one of these is a trap? This is it. The listing says freehold, but the campground owner must approve your buyer when you sell. You pay site fees every year, forever. You can only use it 6 months a year. And the rules about guests, pets, and noise are someone else's to set. It's beautiful, it's modern, it's Instagram perfect, and the word freehold on the title is doing a lot of work to hide what this property actually is. Here's what kills me about this property. People will buy it because it looks good and the title sounds safe. They'll ignore the fine print because the photos are pretty. And 5 years from now, when they want to sell because they're tired of the fees and the rules, they'll realize they overpaid for a cabin they never truly owned. Don't fall for it. This ranks last. Number 4, Schreiber Waterfront, $125,000. This one hurts to rank low because waterfront matters, but the renovation costs are real, and they're unavoidable. An 85-year-old cabin needs work. Unless you can do electrical, plumbing, and carpentry yourself, you're spending another $40,000 to make this livable. If you're a skilled DIYer with time and patience, this jumps to number 2. The bones are there. The location is incredible. You could turn this into something special, but if you're paying contractors for everything, the math doesn't work. Number 3, Timmins Mountjoy Chalet, $109,900, solid, functional, turnkey. You can use this immediately. The heating costs are real, $300 to $400 a month in winter if you're not careful and the space is tight. But it works for winter sports enthusiasts, for couples who want a cozy retreat, for anyone who values move-in ready over project. This is a safe bet. It's not the best value, but it's not a gamble either. It ranks 3rd because it does what it promises. Nothing more. Nothing less. Number 2, Wawa Waterfront, $79,900. Here's the controversial take. If you have the skills and the budget to add infrastructure, this is the second best value on the entire list. $80,000 for Waterfront is absurd. It doesn't exist anywhere else in Ontario. Yes, it needs a well. Yes, it needs septic and a bathroom. Yes, it needs solar or a generator. But even with $40,000 in improvements, you're at $120,000 all in for legitimate waterfront property on a river that flows into Lake Superior. That's incredible. The catch, you have to actually do the work. If you won't, if this cabin will sit there for 3 years while you plan to get to it eventually, this drops to last place. But if you're serious, if you've got the skills or the budget and you actually want off-grid wilderness, this is a steal. Number 1, Hillsport, $129,999, best overall value, and it's not even close. 3 bedrooms, nearly 1,000 square feet, functional heating system that won't bankrupt you, a garage, storage, space for a family or guests, proximity to world-class outdoor recreation, year-round road access, and actual ownership. No campground owner, no site fees, no one approving your future buyer. Yes, it's the most expensive, but it's also the most usable. You could move a family in here, heat it affordably with the wood stove and propane combo, and actually live a life, not just maintain a project or pay eternal fees to a campground owner. For most buyers, this is the smart choice. It's $50,000 more than Wawa, but you're getting a cabin you can use today. It's $5,000 more than TCTDAR, but the ownership is real. The math works, the space works, the location works. This is number 1. So here's what I learned after 6 weeks of researching this. Cheap Northern Ontario real estate isn't a scam, but it's not a fantasy either. Every listing comes with trade-offs. The question isn't which property is perfect. The question is which trade-offs match what I can actually handle. If you hate cold weather, none of these work. If you need a grocery store 10 minutes away, none of these work. If you want Instagram perfect without effort or restrictions, none of these work. But if you're okay with remoteness, if you can handle real winter, and if you're willing to either do the work yourself or pay for it up front without ongoing fees to someone else, these properties represent genuine value. And here's what you do next if you're serious. Pick your top 2 from this list. Visit both. In January, not July, January, spend 24 hours in each town, see what -30 feels like. Drive the roads when they're snow-covered. Talk to locals. See if the reality matches the dream. And if it does, you've just found affordable Canadian real estate that actually exists. One last thing. I'm watching these markets. 3 of these 5 properties will sell in the next 60 days. 1 will sit for a year. And 1, someone's going to buy it, realize they made a mistake, and relist it for $30,000 less next spring. I've seen it happen. Don't be that person. All 5 properties are linked in the description below. Prices, addresses, and listing details exactly as I found them. Drop a comment. Which cabin would you actually buy? I read every single one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.